It's Fraser Simpson here. I'm with David Elderfield, and this is the Queen West Business Podcast. Our guest today, David Elderfield, is a high-tech expert with decades of experience built with major tech firms throughout North America. David is a cautionary tale about the power of our CRA wields and their ability to, rightly or wrongly, destroy the innovative work of our high-tech entrepreneurs which they develop. He risked his career and his accumulated wealth in an attempt to bring Canada an economic opportunity by improving national security at our borders, ports, and in our airport. And he lost big time. David, what is it you would want our listeners to take away from this hearing, our podcast today?
Okay. Hello, Fraser. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss my circumstances and what I've learned from this experience. Right off the bat, I'd like to point out that I'm all about engineering and I am not from a financial background. Given that and my attitude about life that's pretty Canadian, I was cautious about opening our own R&D operation and about expending my hard-earned cash and after-tax dollars on a tech venture, even one designed to boost our national security. Due diligence is a Canadian pastime, as you know, and we were no exception. Like I like to say, we were like Volvo, boring but safe. What I would like to discuss today is about the rights that Canadians have in dealing with the CRA and their role as public servants and how they should deal with us. They spend a lot of time trash talking the Canadian taxpayer, with Bill Morneau even inferring a large segment of us are cheats and liars, but that's not the case. We are a hard-working people. OECD reports multiple times have said we are some of the most compliant and willing taxpayers in the world. And I'm proud of that. We're Canadians, we're deep-hearted people, and I believe we support our country willingly. So the question is, should the CRA be expected to be a Canadian team player, or does their emphasis on maximizing the national treasury preclude them from any heroic protection for each one of us as individuals from the collateral damage that their massive machine can deliver?
Well, this is a big topic and a welcome one, so thank you for coming on to share your story. Let's start by framing the expectations that our government states for the public servants at the CRA. We are going to read 4 full paragraphs from the mandate letter to the Minister of National Revenue sent directly from our Prime Minister. Paragraph 3 states, I expect Canadians to hold us accountable for delivering our commitments, and I expect all ministers to do their part, individually and collectively, to improve economic opportunity and security for Canadians. Well, David, your project definitely attempted to create economic opportunity while adding security for Canadians. So that quote is relevant. Paragraph 7 states, we have also committed to set a higher bar for openness and transparency in government. It is time to shine more light on government to ensure it remains focused on the people it serves. Government and its information should be open by default. If we want Canadians to trust their government, we need a government that trusts Canadians. It is important that we acknowledge mistakes when we make them. Canadians do not expect us to be perfect. They expect us to be honest, open, and sincere in our efforts to serve the public interest. Paragraph 10 states, Canadians expect us in our work to reflect the values we all embrace: inclusion, honesty, hard work, fiscal prudence, and generosity of spirit. We will be a government that governs for all Canadians, and I expect you and your work to bring Canadians together. Paragraph 12 states, the Canada Revenue Agency exists to serve Canadians. As Minister of National Revenue, your overachieving goal will be to ensure that the CRA is fair, more helpful, and easier to use. You will lead the government's work to overhaul its service model so that people who interact with the CRA feel like valued clients, not just taxpayers. David, I take it you don't feel like a valued client.
No, I do not. But I do think those paragraphs absolutely outline what we as Canadians want from our tax collectors. The CRA is a long way from that image at this point. So Is it even attainable, what the Prime Minister has stated there? Or are they just empty words? Should we be demanding that they are actionable words, a democratic right defining how we should be treated? I believe that's the case. What's your position?
Well, it's the past several years I've been doing this for 35 years, and I have a team of about 12 people. In the past, I would say 3 years, especially the last year in particular, the collections enforcement has been absurd. They're freezing bank accounts, ruining businesses, ruining people's lives, and it's been really, really frustrating. Hence my excitement to get you on board in the way that what's happened to you and to tell your story. Because I think I'm with you. I think it needs to get out there. We need to collectively get the story out to let Canadians know what's happening. And as you know, there was a 4-city tour done by Revenue Canada early last year, and it was all about improving the fairness and procedures and getting feedback from Canadians about the agency. And they claimed at the time to make that a transparent process and to let us have our say. And what did they end up doing is that they didn't release any of the submissions. None of it was online. It should have been online for all of us to read. And they came up with, they said that they were going to come out in the late fall last year with recommendations. They really, and it was in December before they came out with 12 recommendations by the Ombudsman. And all 12 recommendations were addressed to collections. And so I called them and I sent a letter off to them twice to say what has been done with these recommendations and what is the action plan. And I got 2 form letters back basically saying, we've looked at it and we'll get back to you. So they've taken no action in over a year. So don't mean to go on about it a little bit too much, but I think your story is it's not a common one, but there's many stories like yours out there, and things need to be fixed at Revenue Canada. There's no question, and we need to get to these recommendations. They need to be implemented, and I think I'm going to let you, David. I know that you believe negative CRA issues impact Canadians at an epidemic level, or are these isolated cases? And I'd kind of like to hear your opinion on it, because you've got an engineering background and a business background. You're out west as well. I'm out east. So yeah, I'd like to hear your feeling on you've got a lot of contacts with your politicians out there, and just tell me what your feeling is about Revenue Canada and the perception there.
All right. Well, it's been a rough ride. I got to tell you that. And the impact on my life is not just the financial and my career. It has impacted relationships throughout. And nothing harms a life more than that. So I want it addressed. And of course, I would be fighting my case even if I was the only one, because I hate bullies. I hate being bullied. But if you read the articles and the professional warnings about getting on the CRA's naughty list, the prevalence of words like fear, dreaded, isolated, depressed, it's just mind-blowing that public servants should be eliciting these reactions. And it's an epidemic in nature. I see more and more people fear authorities, not just the CRA, but the police. We're even beginning to fear ticking off the garbage man by not having our bins in the right location. I believe what we need to make ourselves a powerful democracy like we used to be, I believe we need mutual respect to come back to the table. Fear is never a useful or productive tool. Why does the CRA refuse to address this obvious issue when even the Prime Minister's mandate letter speaks directly to it? My best guess is that they're beginning to enjoy the power that they have, and that is just a human nature issue, and it requires accountability.
Well, you finished with what I'd like to underline is that the accountability is and transparency is what we need. We've got the accountability is a huge issue because I tell you, I deal with Revenue Canada officers every day, and I would tell you that 9 out of 10 are actually decent folk. But that one can cause a lot of damage, and you'd be shocked at the stories that I could tell you about what they do. Taking cancer victims, freezing their bank accounts so that they can't get access to medical supplies, just horrible, horrible stories. And when I've got kind of a litigation background, so I've been fighting back with a number of these, and I escalate it, and I go to the director, and sometimes I take them to court, but I cause a lot of damage. And what I keep finding is that there's no accountability for these people. They don't. There's no mechanism for holding them accountable, and that's what we need. Again, back to the recommendations, all 12 about collections, and a lot of them are just completely common sense, but we don't have a mechanism for enforcing them, and that's what we need. And to do that, we have to do it at the grassroots level. So it's guys like us. We got to get together, but we got to get together with the MPs, get a few of them together, and start tabling legislation. Because I can tell you, I can name about 5 resolutions right away that would be easy. One, strip them of their power to freeze bank accounts. Why are we still doing crazy stuff? We don't have debtor prisons anymore. We don't, hang people because they stole a horse or something. Like these rules got to change. And especially, like I've had families where the wife has called me on a Friday night, and this has happened several times, and crying, saying that, my bank account's been frozen. I can't feed my family this weekend. I have to go to friends and neighbors to get food. Like, it's that bad. And I'm like, they had no notice. There's certain procedures they're supposed to go through, like send you a notice, for example, or a legal letter. But there's no follow-up on that. What if they didn't send it? A lot of times they don't send it and they just freeze your bank account. So now how do you follow that up? You don't even know. It's a faceless person on the end of the phone. So, you kind of touched it earlier when you said accountability, but I think you've kind of encapsulated this a bit, that, really, I think, accountability, it's really what do we do from here? And I think it's, like I said, guys like us getting together and then showing a united front with, MPs and getting some concrete steps taken. What do you think?
Absolutely. You're talking about concrete. I'd like to bring concrete examples to the table. When I look at past responses the CRA has made when they were painted publicly as being abusive. In 2007, this is a case that I'm really, really well aware of. CRA pumped out the taxpayers' Bill of Rights in that year in response to losing a landmark case to Urban LaRue. He was out in Prince George. I'm sure you're familiar with his case.
Yeah.
I've spoken to this man, and his win, quote unquote win, cost him his livelihood. It cost him his health. It cost him all of his happiness. He lost his relationships over this. That is not much of a win for a man who did a great service for his fellow Canadians. And they were exceedingly abusive to this man. It took him 16 years to get a settlement, and he was without lawyers at the last minute. And when they finally offered him a settlement, he just wanted it over with. He paid them $10. And a lawyer would have said, no. They have to pay you $10. And that shows the liability. But he made the mistake. He wanted it over with. And it was such an abusive situation. So he lost all his rights to civil penalties. The CRA needed to do something in response to the PR disaster of this loss. And so they put out the 16 Bill of Rights that we have now documented from the CRA. And they only pay lip service to this. They put out 16 rights that you and I have when we are being treated with by the CRA.
Yeah.
But it's only lip service they give to it.
Yep.
A large proportion of their staff still don't even know about that, and even the taxpayers ombudsman noted that. And it's supposed to be the basis for all of her decisions as the taxpayers ombudsman. Shira Prophet is in that role now. She's supposed to be a fair, unbiased voice in deciding whether these rights are being adhered to. So when my circumstances started, my first move when addressing my dilemma was to clearly point out to the CRA and to the Ombudsman's office directly through Senator Percy Down that my rights were being crushed. Two responses came back to me. The CRA stated that because the Bill of Rights is not legally binding, I had no right to demand those rights, which is a bizarre definition of the word rights.
Completely bizarre. You should be allowed to, take them up civilly on those rights if they don't enforce them.
Absolutely. The Ombudsman was delivered my package of complaints and supporting documentation, which both came out of the CRA and out of third-party documentation. And she received it through Senator Percy Down. He absolutely went out of his way to directly place it on her desk for review with a request that he was concerned and it needed to be addressed. Now, it took her 6 weeks to reply to me directly. She ignored the senator, did not reply to him ever, which I'm just going to say is completely unprofessional. But when she got back to me, the email stated, "This is not our mandate. Your package will not be reviewed." Now, right out of the gate there, I look at this and I say, when she says it's not my mandate and that it's not going to be reviewed, my first question is, how does she know what my circumstance is if she won't even review the package?
Yeah.
And as we talk, you will see my issues are tailor-made for what the definition of her role is. So I went further and I complained further. Kathy Hawara, assistant commissioner at the CRA, followed up with a letter of explanation of why this had all happened. She opened her letter, just to make sure that we're talking about somebody who had the authority. She opened the letter indicating she spoke with the full force of the revenue minister as well as the prime minister himself. And this is how she explained it in her words. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights follows an approach accepted by numerous national and international tax administrations to promote taxpayer rights through the use of a non-statutory declaration or charter of taxpayer rights. It is not legislated because it includes service rights, which cannot be enforced through the court system. Now, I went and looked at that and I reviewed that, and I understand the words that she uses are parsed very legally. But if you actually dig into it, our neighbor to the south, the United States, takes the word rights far more seriously than we do, obviously.
Yeah.
In that nation and in others, the taxpayer bills of rights that they carry the full force of the law. Somehow they are able to define their rights such that it protects their taxpayers, while we're only capable to produce a placebo document in our democratic structure. It is the CRA indicating to us that the USA has more intelligent, more skilled personnel. I look at that and I say, well, that's what we are indicating, or we can do better. As stated, the protector of these so-called rights is the taxpayer ombudsman, who insists at every turn that their office is independent of the CRA. And yet, who does she report to? The org chart is perfectly clear that she reports strictly to the National Revenue Minister. I spent decades in management roles in large tech corporations. In my realm, the Ombudsman and our taxpayers' revenue minister, I've got to stop, I'm sorry. Hang on, I'll pause this.
No, you keep it going on.
Here we go. Okay, sorry for that interruption. So the world I come from, the fact that the Ombudsman works directly under the Revenue Minister, who's the head of the CRA, is a clear conflict of interest. That's the world I come from, and I believe most of the public companies and the commercial world that we deal with on a regular basis would also consider it that. In government, a longtime MP in Hamilton area, David Sweet, also thinks it's a conflict of interest. Mr. Sweet has formally requested numerous times that the taxpayers' ombudsman report directly to Parliament in the same manner as the Auditor General. He's been asking that this structure be beyond reproach, transparent, open, and honest, just like the PM's mandate letter demands. Instead, the CRA seems to use smoke and mirrors while pretending to be contrite. And that just isn't love for Canada. It seems to be a love of power, and it needs to change.
Okay, those are broad strokes of where you see systemic problems, but let's get down to your personal experience. How would these structural changes have altered the outcome in your life?
No, Fraser, regardless of what we do, accountability is something that makes us all deliver better, more accurate work. The CRA is a massive 46,000 strong bureaucratic nightmare for those that our taxmen deem outside the accepted norms. Right off the bat and out of the blue, like you stated earlier, they can start right off freezing accounts without warning. They did this to my company, and it immediately puts them in the driver's seat as the taxpayer loses all means to hire professional financial and legal defenders. W5 uncovered proof of this strategy in mid-2010 when this was stated. Their goal is to break the taxpayer, said Jeff Perry, a former CRA auditor, in his interview with W5. CRA auditors have the feeling that if the person has no resources, how are they going to defend? People go and they'll pay their assessments, even though they know they're not true assessments, because they can't afford the process. What we at WFI could never understand was why the CRA would have any interest at all in a pre-revenue, pre-production R&D company that was developing homeland security solutions. Their own SR&ED arm had completed 2 technical audits of us. Everyone was satisfied that the engineering staff of the company all had extensive and appropriate work histories to professionally address the technical hurdles we might encounter. And the losses that we experienced in paying for these developments were accurately tracked and approved multiple times. Those losses were made out of the capital that I loaned to the company. Where is there any tax liability in this story? Let's back up to the beginning. Being Canadian, we had not just charged in and started spending our hard-earned cash. We started the project in our spare time. We wrote up over a 500-page technical treatise on our unique approach. This package was delivered to the top federal ministers to be reviewed. They spread it amongst the RCMP Science Lab, the border security, and our military. Letters of support for our approach and our project were received before we even formalized a company from Anne McClellan, Bill Graham, Eleanor Kaplan, and Denis Coderre, with assistance from Blaine Favel, ex-Grand Chief of Saskatchewan. We took meetings with the officials from immigration, transport, borders, and military personnel. Only at this point did we formalize the project within a corporate structure and open a business account with my own personal money being loaned to the effort as startup capital. We did not jump. We were boring and went the safe route. To answer your question, taxpayers must always be recognized as the engine driving this country. When our public servants realize they are assistants only, the oil making the engine run smoothly, then Canada becomes an unstoppable force. And issues like that I'm experiencing right now will become nothing but a bad memory.
Was yours purely a Canadian venture, or was this a complex structure?
We were loaded with American advisors, and we were working on strategic partnership with Equifax out of the UK. But the financing and operations were 100% Canadian, and they were pretty straightforward. The company structure was developed by Ron Grattan, the partner in charge of our account at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we had chosen that company because they are a top 5 accounting firm, hiring them so that we would never have to worry about the business side. We were, again, playing it safe. With my background in cellular data systems and GPS, the initial American connections were already in my files. I had worked on developments that were based out of the Skeena Valley in BC, and the contacts I had there allowed me to open discussions with Maher Terminals, a New Jersey-based port management company that had won the operations contract for the Prince Rupert Port. Before we formalized the project, we had received tentative approval to run tests and pilot programs out of their port facilities. We were proposing the idea that a portion of the port become a dedicated green lane operation where technology had analyzed the containers and there was never a delay on pre-approved cargo units. For Prince Rupert, this meant the ability to offload containers from ships directly onto rail cars heading east. The concept of this high speed, high efficiency, and highly secure port quickly attracted provincial attention. Rich Coleman was deputy premier at the NBC at the time, and we received a direct call from him to invite us on a trade mission to California. Premier Gordon Campbell took a personal interest in our solutions while on that trip, and we ended up being introduced to both the Montecito Group and CSAVE. Montecito was a advisor and investment group made up of retired military officers, and CSAVE is South America's largest container shipping company. Long story short, both companies became strategic partners, and Montecito put Jim Ellis, Lieutenant General of the USA, who's retired, and Admiral Albert, I always get his name wrong, Al Bachoco, on our board. Both brought direct access to DARPA. And we were invited into the HS ARPA, Smart Container Security Program, a cross-border cooperative program that connected us with U.S. Homeland Security personnel. We then hired one of the top transport lawyers in North America, Joel Weber, to take meetings in Washington with us and represent us in the United States. But I'm going to say it again. We ran a truly Canadian company with a vast majority of the hardware and software development taking place in either Calgary or in our White Rock, BC office. Our development team was Canadian. The money financing the startup was my after-tax cash. With US interest high and strategic support high, that was great. But we were 100% Canadian in our operations. So back to your question on the structural issues at the CRA and how they would be able to see the obvious. All of what I just reiterated was information the CRA had in their possession, and common sense should have prevailed. The reason that these obvious data points didn't add up for them is that the bureaucracy is so big. It's too big to take a moment for rational perspective in many cases. And the left hand truly hasn't watched what the right hand is doing. There's a continuous churning of their staff, which means your file will change hands so frequently that no single contact there ever deals with a substantial history within that file. There's an underlying problem within their culture. They've instilled the sense that they must discount what they're being told by Canadian citizens because we are dishonest. Mr. Morneau's unfortunate series of tweets that started with, "The rules are designed to help businesses grow, not shelter personal income from tax," completely painted entrepreneurs and MDs as cheats and liars, which is not the case. But it is such a basic belief among our tax collectors in their pursuit of dollars instead of truth. When we talk about truth, I have to also state it was interesting that Mr. Morneau's, at his insistence, that he be taken at his own word when he said he forgot about his family's villa in France. The fundamental democratic structure of our bureaucracies was supposed to be based on public servants working for the people. What we've achieved is a bureaucracy that instills fear in the people that it was supposed to serve. Bottom line, I believe fear is just destructive. Only rational thought and action is productive.
I agree. Explain to the listeners why you were taking so much risk to complete this R&D when your own initial schedule saw there would be no revenues for the first 60 months.
People don't understand R&D and high tech. We're not a big deal in Canada. We are still more of a resource country than a development country. But if we look across the border, we'll see the reasons. First of all, my Canadian answer is that we saw a need to defend the country. So there was a patriotic element. That is not to say we weren't after profit. The business answer, in a word, is Google. What we saw in Google was a company that did true R&D for years, accumulating strategic partners along the way before they released anything publicly. We wanted to follow that. We saw that they had had huge success, and they are now, because of that basic foundational approach, They are now the greatest repository of knowledge and data in the world and in the history of mankind. We follow the same game plan because all good things need to be supported by users in the long run, but staying the course needs consistent management. We absolutely had a game plan to get to profit. We asked for no handouts. We successfully initiated strategic partnerships with Equifax, Alcan, CP Ships, CSAFE, Reimers Van Lines, and completed binding agreements with major investors, but only once it made sense. I have dealt with high-tech investors for decades, and they are a hard-nosed bunch, as you probably have experienced. You sell a position to them too early, and they will leave you in control of nothing except maybe the computer on your desk. When we finally entered into a binding investment agreement with GRI, we retained 50% ownership in an agreement that valued the company at $12 million US. My financial risk was made with full realization that we had major technical hurdles, major business hurdles, and major investment hurdles. When each of those was successfully addressed, we were shocked that it was our own government that would bulldoze us. Defeat was snatched from the jaws of victory.
You know, David, I think we'll stop there, and we're going to do a series with you. I'm not sure how many podcasts we're going to do, but your story is very interesting. What hits me is when I hear you summarize your feelings on Revenue Canada is you talk almost like a 35-year experienced accountant like myself. I can't believe how all your points are all points that I would make, and they're very succinct. You've really expressed yourself well, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the story, and we'll give you as much time as it takes to get it out there, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the time, Fraser, and a pleasure to chat with you.
Okay, have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
You can find this, future and past podcasts, and other content we release on YouTube. We also have socials on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, which can be found in the comments below. If you liked our show today, please give us a like. Drop a comment below. If anyone wants to see us do something specific on our main channels, please comment below or DM me, and we will be able to hear what you have to say. In 2 weeks, we have another podcast coming your way. Keep an eye out for that. And if you want a reminder, hit that little bell icon next to the subscribe button, and you'll get it in your notifications right away. Until next time, that was the Queen West Podcast.